Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Alive and Thriving. This is going to be Chapter 11 of the Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. I will do my best to look at the camera when I speak, and if I'm not, then it's because I have two cameras recording simultaneously. One is for the live feed, and the other one is for YouTube and upload once I'm done. Got a pretty cool little setup here now. Starting to get more into the live video production as well as the recorded video production that the camera I'm looking at right now is, and got to update my office a little bit, so it's pretty cool. Kind of proud of it, so just want to take a moment to show the live feed exactly what that looks like. And I'm going to reach over to the camera here and just tilt this up, and you can see that what I've got going on here are my things I deem important, just kind of some accomplishments. I got the Phi Kappa Phi plaque there. Up above that, I have going on the sacred geometry in an arc. That is the Haney family crest there, what the crest means. And over here, I have the Alpha Sigma Lambda Honor Society, and those two things are just College of Arts and Letters Dean's List certifications. Behind me I have some more sacred geometry and some beautiful plants. And then there's my family in a Colorado picture frame. There's some more of my family there. So, put this back on that thing, and alright, set that up there. If I'm looking a little unrested, it's because I have unmindful neighbors who like to throw parties on Sunday nights, so I get to deal with that joy. Alright, so that's chapter 9. Looking for chapter 11 here, and there it is, chapter 11. So we did chapter 10 last video. It was a longer chapter. It talked about how the masters see the inception of the United States and the United States Constitutional Republic as being a parallel to the life story of Jesus Christ, and in many ways you can definitely see it that way. At her inception, the United States was a peace-loving nation. The Founding Fathers established this republic so that we could be, in a positive way, to use the term, separatist. We wanted to separate ourselves from the warlike nature that were the nations of the time in Europe. The Founding Fathers had identified that Europe was a tumultuous place that periodically needed to upheave its sense of stability and peace and engage in war. The Napoleonic Wars, then 100 years later, World War I, and then several years after that, World War II. So two of the most calamitous events in the United States in world history, and all, well, three of them really, and all major wars up to that point having been fought mainly on the European peninsula, were the reason why the Founding Fathers, that and the right and the freedom to practice religion as they saw fit, were why the Founding Fathers wanted to establish a United States Republic, so that we would not have to be subject to this type of endeavor any longer. Without further ado, let's get in and see what the Masters have in store for us in chapter 11. The day we arrived at this village was very rainy, and we were all drenched to the skin. We were assigned to very comfortable quarters, with a large, comfortable, furnished room that we could use as a dining and sitting room. This room was exceedingly warm and cheery, and one of our party asked where the heat came from. We all looked around, but could not find a stove or any place where the heat came from, although there was a warm glow that was very noticeable. We wondered at this, but did not say much, as we were becoming accustomed to surprises and were quite certain that all would be made plain later on. We had just seated ourselves at the dinner table when a meal, and then the four came in. We did not know where they came from. They all appeared at one end of the room simultaneously, and at the end of the room were where there were no openings. They appeared there without any noise or display and walked quietly to the table where Emil introduced the others. Then they sat down as though perfectly at home. Before we realized it, the table was filled with good things to eat, but no meat. These people do not eat meat, nor anything that has had conscious life. If you are a practicing vegetarian or vegan, then you recognize that right there. These people do not eat meat, nor anything that has had conscious life, as why you went vegan or why you went vegetarian is certainly why I did it. I no longer wanted to basically receive life force energy by taking it from another thing, basically taking its life force like a vampire and consuming it to sustain my life force. The earth is plentiful in its bounty to sustain your life, not only with very subtle and unseen energies in the forms of positive and negative ions, but also in the form of plant matter, okay? Which is conscious on a certain level, but it's not conscious of like the way that a dog or a deer is conscious. After the meal was finished and we were sitting around the table, one of our party asked how the room was warmed. Emil said, "The warmth that you feel in this room comes from a force that we are all able to contact and use. This force or power is higher than any of your mechanical force or power, but can be contacted by man and used as light, heat, and power, even to the driving of all mechanical appliances. It is what we call a universal force. If you were to contact and use this force, you could call it perpetual motion. We call it universal power, God power, supplied by the Father to work for all his children. It will turn and move every mechanical device, furnish transportation without the consumption of fuel in any way, and will also furnish light and heat. It is everywhere present without money or price and can be contacted and used by all." One of our party asked if the food had been prepared by this force. We were told that the food came prepared as we had eaten it, directly from the universal, just the same as the bread and the other provisions had been supplied heretofore. We were then invited by Emil to accompany the group to their home, about 200 miles distant, where we would meet Emil's mother. He went on to say, "My mother is one who has so perfected her body that she was able to take it with her and go on and receive the highest teachings. Therefore, she is living in the invisible at all times. She is doing this from choice, as she wishes to receive the highest. And by receiving the highest teaching, she is able to greatly assist us. In order to make this clear to you, I might say that she has gone on until she has reached the celestial realm, as you would call it, the place where Jesus is. This place is sometimes called the seventh heaven. To you, I suppose this suggests the mystery of mysteries. Let me say that there is no mystery about it. It is a place in consciousness where every mystery is revealed. Those who have reached that state of consciousness are outside the mortal vision, but they can return and converse and teach those who are receptive. They can come in their own bodies, for they have so perfected their bodies that they can go where they will with them. They are able to return to earth without reincarnation. Those who have passed through death are obliged to be reincarnated in order to return to earth with a body. This body was given to us as a spiritual, perfect body, and we must so see and keep the body in order to retain it. Those who have left the body and have gone on in spirit now realize that they must again take up a body and go on and perfect it. It was arranged before leaving the table that evening that the party should divide into 5 groups, each group in charge of one of the 5 that had appeared in the room and taken dinner with us. This would enable us to cover a larger field and would greatly facilitate our work. And at the same time, it would enable us to verify such things as traveling in the invisible and through transference. This plan would give us at least 2 of our men in each party. This plan would give us at least 2 of our men in each party and the other of the 5 as leader. we would be quite widely separated, yet we were to keep in touch through those who were so greatly befriending us and giving us every opportunity to prove their work. So in here we talk about a few things, and I just want to see how long the next chapter is, and maybe I'll go on to read chapter 12. Yeah, it's only 3 pages, so I think I will go ahead and read chapter 12. Here we're talking about the opportunity in chapter 11 to perfect the body, to perfect anything for that matter. If you are beginning to practice the ways of like Feng Shui or even martial arts, we know that at a certain point something within your mind clicks and your whole entire objective becomes to perfect whatever form of art you are endeavoring in. Your desire becomes one of perfection, and not perfection in a so-called neurological way, but perfection in a way that is the art is moving through you. Okay, it's expressing through you. In so doing, you often render the most beautiful brush strokes or the most beautiful poses or dance formations without really even, on a certain level, knowing what's going on. It's the same way with martial arts. It's as though the force, the universal God force source energy that they're talking about here that's warming the room is manifesting in you and around you and through you, and in so doing a level of perfection is achieved on the movement or the expression realm that just is almost impossible to achieve using purely mechanical means of the body and intellectual means of the mind. And that's what they're talking about here, that until you get to the level of consciousness where you understand that the temple that you're inhabiting, i.e. the physical body, is yours to perfect, and then you go on and you do so in the most minute ways, you will continue to occupy a body until you learn that that's part of the reason why you're here. You're here to perfect, in a sense, everything that you come into contact with. This may sound daunting to the intellectual mind, but really what it means is allowing for the love force energy that is God, that is universal source life energy, to flow through you. And in so doing, everything that you touch becomes gold, so to speak. Okay, it's the meaning behind the expression having a green thumb or the Midas touch. It means that you are so subtle in your ways, you're so in contact with universal life force energy that everything that you come into contact with just manifests and blooms like a flower does when the sunlight hits it. You are expressing love in such a way that everything responds to you in a loving manner. This is because you're sending out perfect love and everything is coming back to you as perfect love. As you send out, so shall you receive. As you sow, so shall you reap. And that is what they're talking about here. One of the major objectives of conscious life in a human body is to perfect the body and to do it in a loving way, to love thy neighbor as thyself. And think about that. What if your soul is yourself? Let's go with this hypothesis real quick. If your soul is yourself and it resides, anatomically speaking, somewhere like in the middle of your chest, let's say that that's the case. Where, then, is your closest living neighbor? The logical answer is your beating heart, your digestive system, your organs, all the tiny little microbes and bacteria that exist within your digestive system, in your stomach, the fauna and the flora, everything about your physical body. That, then, is your closest living neighbor, okay? When you are able to love that as thyself, or love that with all your heart, mind, and soul, because that is a physical representation of the divine, then you may move on to perfectly loving others as Jesus did when he asked for the forgiveness of his persecutors on the cross before dying and being risen, or rising up again. Before you can achieve that level of universal love, you have to perfectly love yourself. And in doing so, you will manifest unconditional love for all life that's around you. And you will realize that taking the life of an animal or anything that it has a conscious life is not a loving thing to do. Especially not then to consume that being's flesh to maintain your own flesh. And I could get deeper, and I will in the coming years, about how this all breaks down scientifically and how this breaks down on the atomic scale, and how the consumption of conscious life or material that has had conscious life or been a part of conscious life, and then your act of consuming it is an unloving act. But we'll save that for another day, okay? Let's go on to chapter 12. It's only 3 pages long, and then we'll wrap this video. The next day, all details were arranged, and 3 of our party, including myself, were to accompany Emil and Jast. The following found each party with its guide and attendants all ready to depart in different directions, with the understanding that we would carefully observe and record all that occurred, and should meet 60 days later at Emil's home in the village just spoken of, 200 miles distance. We were to keep in communication with each other through our friends. This was accomplished each evening by these friends conversing with each other or traveling back and forth from party to party. If we wished to communicate with our chief or with any other member of our party, all we need do was to give our message to our friends, and in an incredibly short time we would have the answer. In giving these messages, each would write them out in full and note the time to the minute of each message. Then, when the answer came, we would do the same. When we came together again, we compared notes and found that all notes corresponded. Aside from this, our friends would travel from one camp to another and converse with us. We kept accurate records of these appearances and disappearances. Also, we noted the time, the place, and the conversations, and all checked fully when we compared notes later. So earlier in the book, they talk about the master's ability to dematerialize their bodies and then traverse great distances instantaneously. And this is also what Emil is getting at when he's talking about his mother. His mother is living in the invisible, her body is so subtle, she's on the 7th heaven, the celestial realm. All these things, what they're talking about is being one with the universal life force energy that is God's source energy. Okay, if we boil that down into scientific terms, I'm sure there's someone that's going to watch this eventually and be like, okay, it's more like this than it is like what you just said. But becoming synonymous with the quantum realm, that is what we're talking about here. The ability to attain the smallest small and the tallest tall, as they call God in the Old Testament and the New Testament times. The ability to identify with, okay, become one with all things. If that's the breeze outside or if that's the quantum particles that fill the atmosphere, then so be it. They'll become one with that and basically dematerialize their bodies as you and I are looking at our bodies, and then go and tune in to wherever it is they desire to go. This is frequency dependent and frequency specific. The way that you tune the dial on an old radio to pick up broadcast waves that are coming through the air at specific frequencies is the same way that you take your body from point A to point B, or from Earth to Jupiter for that matter. Alright, there's a specific broadband, if you will, frequency that Jupiter resonates at, and then it's the same way with the planet Earth. If you want to be here on planet Earth, which you currently are by default, your body is vibrating in correspondence with the hertz that is the Earth's vibration. If you wanted to go to Jupiter, you'd have to figure out how to tune your body into that frequency. Or if you want to go to Nepal for that matter, and you're sitting in North America, it's no different. Okay, you'd have to tune into the specific frequency that's emanating from that place at this very specific time, and then you could be there. And that's also the method that they're using to communicate with one another, the masters. Okay, their thoughts, their bodies, and their understanding of consciousness is so refined that the ability to telepathically communicate with their brothers and sisters is known to them. It's something that they have mastered. That's why we call these individuals masters, because they've mastered abilities that are there for all people to master and use, and they're actively employing them. One of the prerequisites with that is that you don't do these things for selfish gain, that you're using these abilities on behalf of assistance to others, service to others. And that's exactly what these masters are doing. They're helping these Westerners remove the veil, if you will, of forgetfulness from their eyes, so that they can see that this is really the way that life lives. Life has the ability to do these things, and it's not restrictive. There are prerequisites to manifesting these abilities, and the number one prerequisite is love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and mind, and then love thy neighbor as thyself. And those are technical terms, but what they really mean is become one with the universal life force energy that is God. And then to get there, you need to be the embodiment of unconditional love. And this was the message that Jesus Christ gave to humanity. It's the message of the masters, and it's what I mean by the work did not stop with Jesus Christ. There was no gap year between his death and resurrection and where we are now. The masters actively employed this wisdom in the Far East and all over the world. We have saints that did it, and they teach. Okay, it's all a teaching process to those who are receptive, so that you can do these things, so that you can fully embody the Christ consciousness and then live according to their ways, which are universal ways. Okay, it's not like a monarchical hierarchy type of a system where you're suppressed and you have to bend the knee in order to get these things. You can think of it that way if you want, but that's kind of a negative way of thinking about it. What it means is become one with life force energy by being unconditionally loving. Refine your consciousness to the point where you understand that all of these abilities are yours to use, and synonymous with that understanding will come the ability to be unconditionally loving. At times after this, we were widely separated. One party would be in Persia, one in China, one in Tibet, one in Mongolia, and one in India, always accompanied by our friends. At times they traveled in the invisible, as we called it, distances as great as 1,000 miles, and kept us informed as to the happenings in progress in each camp. The destination of the party to which I was assigned proved to be a small village to the southwest, located on an elevated plateau well up in the foothills of the Himalayas and about 80 miles from our starting point. We did not take any provisions for the trip, but we were amply provided for at all times and had very comfortable quarters. We arrived at our destination early in the afternoon of the 5th day, were greeted by a delegation of villagers, and shown to comfortable quarters. We noted that the villagers treated Emil and Jast with the utmost reverence. We were told that Emil had never visited the village, but that Jast had been there before. The occasion of his first visit was in response to a call for help to rescue 3 villagers from the fierce snowmen that inhabit some of the wildest parts of the Himalayas. This present visit was in response to a similar call, and also to minister to the sick who could not leave the village. These so-called snowmen are outcasts and renegades who have lived in the snow and ice regions of the mountains until they have developed a tribe that is able to live in the mountain fastness without contact with any form of civilization. Though not numerous, they are very fierce and warlike, and at times capture and torture those who are unfortunate enough to fall into their hands. It proved that 4 of the villagers had been captured by these wild snowmen. The villagers, being at their wits' end to know what to do, had sent out a messenger to get in touch with Jast, and he had come to the rescue, bringing Emil and us along. Of course, we were all excited, thinking we were to get sight of these wild people, whom we had heard of but supposed did not exist. We at first believed that a rescue party would be organized and we would be allowed to join. But these hopes were shattered when Emil announced that he and Jast would go alone and that they would go immediately. In a few moments they disappeared and did not return until the second evening, with the 4 captives, who told wild tales of their adventures and of the strange people that had captured them. It seemed that these strange snow people go entirely naked, that their bodies had become covered with hair like that of a wild animal, and that they can withstand the intense cold of the mountain altitudes. They are said to move over the ground very swiftly. In fact, it is claimed that they are able to pursue and capture the wild animals that live in the region that they inhabit. These wild people call the masters the men from the sun, and when the masters go among them for the prisoners, they do not resist. We were also told that the masters had made a number of attempts to reach these wild people, but these attempts had come to naught because of the fear in which these people held them. It is said that if the masters do go among them, the snowmen will not eat or sleep, but stay in the open night and day, so great is their fear. These people have lost all contact with civilization, even forgetting that they had ever contacted other races or that they are the descendants from them. So far have they separated themselves from others. We were able to get Emil and Jas to say but little about these strange wild tribe, nor could we influence them to take us to them. When we questioned, the only comment was, "They are God's children, the same as we are, only they have lived so long in hatred and fear of their fellow men, and they have so developed the hatred and fear faculty that they have isolated themselves from their fellow men to such an extent that they live completely forgotten that they are descendants of the human family, and think themselves the wild creatures they appear to be. They have gone on in this way until they have even lost the instinct of the wild creatures. For the wild creature knows by instinct when a human being loves it, and it will respond to that love. All we can say is that man brings forth that which he gazes upon and separates himself from God and man, and in this way he can go lower than the animal. It would serve no purpose to take you among them. It would instead harm those people. We are in hopes someday to find someone among them who will be receptive to our teaching and in this way reach them all. We were told that if we wished to make the attempt to see these strange people on our own initiative, we were at liberty to do so, that the masters could no doubt protect us from any harm, and if we should be taken prisoner, they could in all probability secure our release. We found that evening we were scheduled to leave the next day for a very ancient temple, about 35 miles from the village, where we were then stopping. My two companions decided that they would forego seeing the temple and try to get a closer view of the wild men. They attempted to influence two of the villagers to go with them, but in this they met flat refusal, for none of the villagers would leave the village so long as they thought the wild men were around. My friends decided to attempt it alone, after receiving instruction from Emil and Jas as to the trail and general direction. They strapped on their sidearms and made ready to start. Before they left, Emil and Jas had exacted a promise from them that they would shoot to kill only as a last resort. They may shoot to frighten as much as they pleased, but they must give their word that if they killed it would be a last extremity. I was surprised that we even had a .45 Colt with us, as we had not carried firearms about us. I had discarded mine long ago and did not know where they were. It so happened that one of the coolies that helped to look after our wants had put 2 pistols in the luggage, and they had not been removed. So there's kind of a lot in there, and some of it is a bit, it's definitely on the fringe. If you're talking about wild snowmen that go off and reject civilization to the point where they live in such rapturous fear of all things living that they begin to identify with those things. But it's kind of an analogy. It really is. All of these things can be read at different levels of consciousness, and you can interpret them in different ways. And one of the basic main message here is that mankind can live lower than the animals. And Emil says that bluntly. He says that even a wild animal knows when it's receiving unconditional love or just regular human love from a human entity and will thus respond accordingly. most times in an accepting manner, in a gentle manner. Take a wild cat, for example. And first it's kind of sketch. It doesn't really know if you're going to hurt it or feed it or what the case might be, but eventually it becomes known to that animal that what you're really giving out is a force called love, and it responds accordingly. It begins to become buddies with you, if you will. There are wonderful images of women who are so empathic and so attuned to unconditional love that they do this with legitimately wild animals. They'll do it with elk and moose and non-predatorial animals, except for like bears. And they'll go into the forests and they'll spend time meditating, and then the animals will become curious enough, and then they'll have a photographer with them, and they'll take these amazing photos of these women just being unconditionally loving with wild animals. And it's in an attempt to prove that human animals have the ability to be loving with our animal brethren and sisterin, and they will pick up on that. Mankind, on the other hand, is the only animal on the planet Earth that can legitimately shut themselves off from the universal life force energy that is love and go down a path of hatred so far that they no longer recognize love. That love actually becomes like a negative energy to them because they're feeding off of their fear. And that's why they have to have their little bands of tribes and stuff like that. I'm sorry, I'm getting text messages and stuff, and people are congratulating me for stuff that I didn't even know that I did, so that's cool. Anyways, wrap this video up. Just don't be like an entity that cuts itself off because of fear, so far from love that you don't recognize what true love is anymore. I think we've all probably come into contact with some of our friends or acquaintances that live this way. The human animal that is living lower than the animal. And that's kind of a derogatory statement, but I mean, it's really, really on the nose. It's definitely, we've all come into contact with those individuals who have grown so comfortable with the stimuli that they give themselves, either through their mouth or through their eyes, that it becomes their source of love. And when then genuine love comes into contact with them, they view it as like this disruptive force, this thing that's like ruining their lives and blah, 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 blah. And in a way it is ruining their lives because their life has become one of venturing down the path of service to self, which is eventually marked by hatred of others and just the reverence for the separation that you cause. But nevertheless, you can only endure that for so long before you literally have to do a 180 and start down the path of service to self, or service to others and unconditional love. So if you know anybody that's like kind of wrapped up in that state of fear that the masters are talking about these wild men existing in, the best thing that you can do for that person or with that person is to give them love from afar, from a distance. We talked about in this video how all things transfer through the universal life force energy that is God, that is universal life force, and love is that power, okay? It is that one radiating broadcast signal from the center of the universe, if you want to call it that, that all beings may tap into and come in contact with, and you can be a channel for that. Kind of like an amplifier is a channel for whatever signal is coming through the microphone. You can be that. Alright, so the universal life force that is love is coming from the center of the universe, let's call it, and you can be that amplifier, that megaphone that's tapping into it and then allowing it to radiate out from you like a cone or like a pointed thing, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to call it. And you can send that and direct that to whomever, your animals, your plants, your home, your friends, and your family. And in so doing, you're doing the work. You know what I'm saying? You are fulfilling that which we've come here to fulfill, which is to come into contact with universal life force energy, love, God, to become so subtle that we feel it and recognize it at all times, and then to become so attuned that we amplify it and send it out so that others may come into contact with it as well. Alright, so namaste, go forth, do wonderful things, have a wonderful day, and I wish you all the best. Until next time.